Hey, Mutts! Welcome, welcome. Today we have young adult authors with us. We have Joy McCullough, and she actually writes across the age categories, picture books, middle grade, YA, she does it all. But she's here today with her YA hat on. Then we also have Isabel Sterling, and she writes young adult novels. She has 3 out currently, I believe, with that are all paranormal, vampires, witches, all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm so excited to have them today. Thank y'all for being here. So we'll just jump right in, and I want, I'll have each of you tell me about your publishing journey, long and windy, short and sweet. Does that actually exist? I don't know. So yeah, just give me the scoop. How did you get to where you are? Joy, we'll start with you.
Well, mine's long. I'll try not to make it. I'll try to condense where I can. But yeah, well, first I studied theater and I was a playwright for a lot of years before I started writing any fiction. But when my kids were small and it was really hard to do theater as a parent of young ones and being out at night and stuff. Plus, I was reading aloud to my eldest a whole bunch of middle grade. I started to think a little more in terms of fiction, and I saw the possibilities of middle grade, and so I started trying to write middle grade. And I went through the whole process and I got critique partners and I learned about querying and I wrote my first manuscript and I queried it and it didn't sell or get an agent. And so I wrote the next one and I queried it and the next one I queried it and the next one I queried it. And on the 5th one I wrote and queried, I got my first agent. And then we put something on submission and it didn't sell, and another thing on submission and it didn't sell, and another thing on submission and it didn't sell. And then I decided to switch agents, not because of the not selling, more because of communication issues and stuff. But so then I queried again. I got my current agent. And then the book I signed with him on was middle grade, didn't sell. So it was the 10th book I had written and the 5th book that went on submission, that ended up being my debut novel, which was Bloodwater Paint, which actually was an adaptation of a play that I had written.
Didn't know that.
So
Cool.
yeah, so that's sort of it was a long road, but for me, I feel like everything worked out the way it was supposed to.
Yeah, it gets there eventually, right?
Right.
Isabel, how about you? What was your
Yeah. Well, and I just have to say too, like I love, like, to me, I think the difference between a published author and somebody who doesn't get published is just how like stubborn and tenacious you are. So like for me, I started writing in 2012. I had actually studied music composition in undergrad and got totally burnt out on that. And then I was like, no, it'll be better writing books. So I was writing books while I was in grad school for something unrelated. And same kind of thing, wrote a book, learned about revising, learned about querying, ended up, it was my 4th book that got my first agent. And then we went on submission and then she left the industry. So I had to kind of switch agents. And I actually, while I had been on submission, wrote a middle grade that my second agent did end up submitting, and it was on sub for like 18 months and then just never sold. But the book that had been on sub with my first agent, we actually were able to sub again with my second agent, and that sold and became my debut, These Witches Don't Burn. And then, yeah, so I've been sort of just in the YA space since then. But it was 4 years and 4 books to my first agent, and then about a year on sub to sell, and then of course trad pub moves at a glacier's pace. So my first book actually came out in 2019, so it's 7 years from I want to write a book to a book in the bookstores.
Well, that's better than mine. My journey was almost 20 years long. I was like focused on YA for so long, and that was just, I thought that was where I was going to be. And I could, they always tell you at some point you've got to cut it and go. And I just have this novel I loved. That was the one I entered into pitch for several times. And and then there's nonfiction picture books that was apparently the key for me. So you just have to know when it's time to move on.
I mean, how can you lose with a title like Battle of the Butts? It's perfect.
Well, speaking of picture books, even though this is supposed to be the one thing, Joy, tell us, Major and Champ, how did you get that? I was the most jealous person on the planet when I read that deal announcement. How did that all come about?
So so election day was on a Tuesday, but it wasn't until Saturday that Biden was officially declared.
Mhm.
And when that happened, I was like so relieved and so happy. And I had seen various posts talking about Major being the first shelter dog in the White House. And so I truly that afternoon I drafted it and I sent it to my agent, and I knew it was going to be a time thing. And so I sent it. I usually try not to email him on the weekends, but I sent it to him straight away because I was like, this is a time thing. And he was like, oh, yeah. And he sent it out immediately. And now it's a little blurry, but I feel like it was like Tuesday or Wednesday that we had the preempt, and they, I mean, it was wild. So that was like November like 9th or something. And the book came out for Inauguration Day, end of January.
I thought it was like really.
Wow.
I know.
Publishing can hustle when it wants to.
So they can. But the wild thing, I mean, it was very simple text, and I did almost no revisions. Shada Avabi Best, though, the illustrator, she had 2 weeks.
I was gonna say
2 weeks. Like I can't even fathom that. So yeah, it was wild. It was like there were no trade reviews or anything. There wasn't time for anything.
Yeah, no.
It was just like, bam, it's out.
Oh my gosh. Well, let this be a lesson to everyone. Strike while the iron is hot. I mean, just we get it, go, boom. I mean, that's amazing. It's so funny. You're just telling us about the long, winding journey to the first one, and then like, boom.
Bam, yeah. I had a while earlier. I had tried. I think it was the first picture book I tried drafting, and I had tried drafting something about Greta Thunberg. And my agent was like, this is lovely, but like there's already a million things out there about her, and so it really is striking, the right time. I mean, not for every book, but sometimes there are those situations.
Wow, that's amazing. All right, so Isabel, tell us, have you had an aha moment on this journey? I mean, we've talked about the journey. Is there an aha moment? Writing, publishing, marketing. I mean, and you can pick your aha moment. Has there been an aha moment? You're like, I got it. I understand it now. It's finally clicked.
If only there was like the one big one that just made it all make sense. I feel like every book has to have its own aha on like the craft level, because every time I write a book, it's like, I guess it's because we're always pushing to be better that it always remains somehow just as hard. It's like, darn it. I think for me, one of my sort of maybe more recent ahas was like really getting that if you're going to be in publishing for the long haul, like you have to find a way for it to really fit as part of your life. When I was a debut, I was like so excited, but I was also like, I think a lot of debuts, terrified that if I like missed a deadline or did anything remotely wrong, it would just all fall apart and it would all go away. And now part of it too, I'm a foster parent. So I've had to this last 2 years learn how to write while parenting, because for the first like 8 years I didn't have any kids, and it's a lot easier, turns out, when you don't have kids. So I think for me the aha is like understanding that like it's okay to have a life, and actually that helps you write better some ways when you were able to have some distance. And I think one of my favorite things, which is maybe a weird thing to be a favorite thing, is I'm getting so good at knowing when a book isn't working and when to just stop and sort of like cut and run.
I have not gotten there yet. I need that skill. Please share. How did you get there?
I don't know. I think a lot of it is just like learning to trust your like story instincts. I used to always just be like, because I learned to write in Nano. That was like, I was a NaNoWriMo writer. So I was just like, just get it down. And I've learned with my most recent book that I'm working on, that'll be a 24 release, that like sometimes just what you've got planned is absolutely doesn't work and you need to scrap it and start over. And it feels a lot better to do that at like 30,000 words instead of 80.
Definitely. Joy, how about, I mean, we can say your aha was strike while the iron's hot, but do you have another one that you
So I think so because I was a playwright for a lot of years before fiction, I had in place sort of what my writing life looked like. It
Hmm.
wasn't my full-time job as a playwright. It's even harder to make a living in theater than fiction. But but I still, I understood the process, I understood rejection, all that stuff. And so I had some sense of this, but fairly early on in fiction writing, I remember seeing a tweet from Shannon Hale, um, who said something along the lines of, and I will she said it better than I will, that first drafting is just shoveling sand into a pile,
Hmm.
and that then you have the sand to make into the castle later. And so I for me, what works best for me is really rough first drafting, letting myself just dump it out, knowing it'll suck, expecting it to suck, because then I have something to work with. And I think when I was first writing fiction, it was tricky because I was already a writer, but even middle grade novels are quite a lot more words than a full length play is usually about 12 to 15,000 words. So it just felt kind of daunting of like, oh,
Mm.
I have to write so much more to tell the whole story. And so knowing that it doesn't have to be good, it just has to be something you can work with, I think is something that was important early on and like continues to be important.
Yeah. That's because I'm actually a screenwriter too. I write screenplays, and so I know they're slightly different than plays, but same, the same kind of thing. And it's so funny because it's like whichever one I'm writing at the time is my least favorite. So like when I'm writing a screenplay, I'm like, I wish I was writing a novel so I could describe stuff and blah blah blah. And when I write a novel, I'm like, oh god, I wish I was writing a screenplay so all I had to care about is dialogue. So it's one of those things. It's it's like you learned your different lessons from each time.
Mm.
So I can see that,
Yeah.
the slower word count from, uh, you know, playwriting going then to novels. It's daunting. You're like, I gotta
Yeah.
fill in all this stuff. Wait a minute, no, I
Yeah.
told my story already. So yeah. So do y'all have like a go-to resource? Like when you're feeling like I need a little boost, do you have a website,
Mm.
podcast? Isabel, I know you do your own podcast, so I was a
I
little
do.
intimidated having others. This is like my second one. And it's not even real podcast, it's just chatty chat. But books, whatever, group you're part of, like where do you go to when you're feeling that need for a little boost in your um writing craft?
I think I mean I definitely have critique partners. I with my novels I've been so lucky that I've been with the same editor for all of my YA and all of my middle grade. Um so I don't use critique partners as much there because I tend to go straight to them with like I can go to them earlier.
Mhm.
But I have a picture book critique group that is hugely helpful, and they're sort of my main thing if I'm like stuck. But the other thing I would say is not so much like a craft book or anything as just knowing that I need to step away and fill the well in other ways.
Yeah.
I need to go outside. I need to just sit and listen to a podcast that's not about writing craft, that's just for
Mhm.
fun, and
Mhm.
crochet or, just like something totally not that. And that's when I work through it, is because if I'm sitting there trying to fix it, um, I'll never fix it.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. Yes, space is huge. I also crochet. I love to crochet.
Yeah.
That's like my like zen at night. I'm like I just also just love because books are so long and they take so much to put together, even just like a draft, let alone having a finished product, to be able to like make a scarf in like a week. I'm just like, this is
Yes.
delicious.
So before you give us your real answer, I will show you.
Ah,
So I don't know if you
Oh
guys
my
have read the
God.
Graceling Realm books by Kristen Kishore, but in the last couple books, there are these blue telepathic foxes that are
Oh
part of the
my
story.
goodness.
And so I made myself my telepathic fox, and it sits next to my computer. So sometimes when I'm like stuck with something, I'll like look at it and tell it to tell me what to do.
that's
That's so good.
awesome.
I know I have these I made.
Ah, those are awesome too, y'all. This is so awesome.
So I'm like in my basement and it's cold down here. Um yeah, but for me, so when I'm stuck, a couple of things that I like to do. I don't read a ton of craft books. For me, I just
Mhm.
usually need to just go and read fiction and
Mhm.
just like spend some time away from my book, absorb stuff that's like really inspiring. I mean, that often helps. Especially if I can kind of just like sit and like binge through a book like in a day or two, which I don't always get to do because we have an almost 3-year-old and you know how that goes. So that's big for me. And then just like being around other writers. I have a group of writers where we call it study hall, and we'll just pop into a Zoom and we'll either write or we'll kind of talk through our stories, or we'll you know, work, but mostly just like it's like being at a coffee shop, but we live in different states and we get to do that virtually. And I love that because I'm just I write full time now. I write and I coach. I do that. And so I'm just like alone. I don't have an office to go to anymore when I used to, before I left, like, you know, my like nonprofit world. So I'd love to be able to just like have some FaceTime with other creatives.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what, you know, I think that was the hardest part, you know, this whole the pandemic, right? That you know, I had a local critique group and, you know, we couldn't meet. And I was just like, I'm very much an introvert, so I'm usually bleeding energy, but meeting with my critique group was like the one time that I actually could feel the energy coming back in. And then not being, you know, we tried Zooming, but it's not the same, you know, you do, you know, you catch up and you do, but it's just not the same as that energy transfer that you feel when you're with your people and you're, you know, you're feeling it. So yeah, I totally get that. So then, so talking about being alone, what is your writing ritual? Isabel, I'll start with you this time. So do you have a ritual? Snacks, drinks, music, coffee shop?
I mean, well, I'm a sucker for caffeine. This is actually my least favorite flavor. The Instacart people brought me the wrong flavor, but I just always want something bubbly with caffeine. So whether it's that or it's like Diet Pepsi or whatever. And then what I actually do, so I teach this to my clients too, because I work with authors and I'm kind of pulling it out right now. So I start every session with a plan. I have a million notebooks lying around. So I like to plan out what I'm going to do. So like sort of set an intention for what I'm going to accomplish. And then I like to do sprints just because I am easily distracted. So that gives me at least 20 minutes of good focus. And I, similar to Joy, like I love to just sort of like get the words down. The more I try to make it good, the worse it comes out. So I just sort of like word vomit on the page. And then I actually love to sort of revise my book in quarters. So I get to like word vomit a quarter and then revise. And then, but like the actual process is these days is usually silence just because I have so much noise in my regular day. So quiet, or oftentimes we'll have study hall going with some friends, do a few sprints. And then I always end with like what I really enjoyed about the session to keep sort of the love alive so that I'm like excited the next time. So I think the biggest thing for me is if I don't do that, then I sort of get into it wasn't enough, I should have written more. And this sort of grounds me in like, no, I kicked butt and this went really well and I'm excited for tomorrow. And I don't have to like be upset that I didn't do more like the rest of the day.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's
I love
so
that.
Lovely and thoughtful and well adjusted of you.
Well, I am a life coach, so I do have some little extra tricks up my sleeve.
That's amazing. I like that makes me want to try that, although I can see myself doing it like 3 times and then forgetting or stopping but I wouldn't stick with it. Although maybe I would. Maybe I would see that like how much it helped me and I would. I just might try that. So I am a write in silence, no distractions person too. I've never, even pre-pandemic, been a coffee shop or libraries, even like there might not be no noise, but people moving around, I just can't. So in my house, it was a lot harder when my kids were younger. So I feel for you. They are 12 and 17 now, and so they are pretty self-sufficient. When they were younger, it was really hard to write if they were home because they would just come to me for everything, you know, and so I was really fortunate that my husband helped me in that he would take them out of the house for a few hours almost every day, so that I could get some work time. But now that doesn't apply as much. They're older, but they are homeschooled, and so they are around, but we've sort of worked it out. And so I have my little office space, which is in the basement. The thing behind me makes it look nice, but it's really not. But I just need to be in my own space. You know, I have my little fox, I have some plants, and just it feels homey. It feels like this is where I do my work. Because they're writing multiple genres, sometimes if I don't always have to work on 2 projects at the same time, but sometimes I do because of where deadlines are at or whatever. And so for that, I will usually decide, okay, I'm working on the YA in the mornings and I'm working on the middle grade in the afternoons or something. I give it some kind of delineation, just so that my brain knows, okay, now I'm shifting into this other thing. But ideally I'm not, but sometimes it just works out that way. So yeah, a lot of herbal tea. I'm not a coffee person. And yeah, snacks. Always there's chocolate and yeah.
Yeah, gotta eat the chocolate. All right, so you've written your book, it's out there in the world, and now we come to the very bad word for writers: promotion, marketing. One of those things, they expect us to do it, but we know it's not gonna really make a difference, but we have to do it. So you need to be doing fun stuff. And I know, Joy, we had a quick little conversation about this, that it's got to be fun. So what are some fun things you have done to promote your novels? Anything fun that or is it all just no?
Well,
I'd rather be writing. Please make it stop.
I got to meet E.K. Johnston like a week before my debut novel came out, and she's a YA fantasy writer. She writes Star Wars books, but we also share a YA editor for her other books. And I asked her, "What's your advice for debut? Like, what's your one piece of advice?" And she said, "Know that you can do absolutely nothing to move the needle on sales." And honestly, like sometimes I tell writers that and they're discouraged by that. To me, it's very freeing. It's like, if there's nothing I can do, then I don't have to try to pour my energy into all these possible things that might help, but then will probably disappoint me because they won't. And instead I can put that energy into another project, because I think the one thing writers can do is make more books so that people discover you and then they go back and they read your other book, So I kind of think that's the main thing. So I always really parrot that line, but that there's nothing you can do to move the needle on sales. So only do things that are fun for you. I think things like this where I get to interact with other writers, are fun. I almost always will say yes to a panel of some sort, if a Zoom panel of some sort, if it's works in my schedule, because that is fun for me. Now if it involves travel and that's a whole other question, because that expends so much more energy. But yeah, that's kind of the only thing I have.
Yeah, I would say like my advice is similar. Like I am very much like, if you, especially because I've only been doing the full-time thing for actually almost a year, but for the 9 out of 10 years I was working full-time. And if you have got like an hour a day and your choice is to write your next book or market the current one, I will always write the next book.
Yeah,
because that is the thing. I like to think of books as like each one is sort of like a brick in the foundation of your career. And the more bricks you have, the bigger career you can build, and the more chances you have to sort of be found and sort of connect with readers. I have done some things like I enjoy. I did some character art for my most recent release, The Coldest Touch. And part of it is like, it's just pretty and it's fun. And I got to like pay an artist, which is nice. And then I also did everybody who entered for the pre-order got like the art mailed to them. And then I was going to draw like one person to be able to do like a Q&A, like a private Q&A. And then I forgot for a year to draw a winner. So I just emailed everybody like a couple months ago and I was like, I'm so sorry. Everybody who entered wins. So just take a time. And that's been, not everybody who entered like took me up on that. So I've had like 4 or 5 conversations with readers, and that's been super fun. I haven't been able to talk to readers in a long time. So to be able to, just chat with people who love my books and about half of them were writers themselves, and you give them some writing advice. Like that was super fun. And I've actually had a couple years without a release, and it's been in some ways kind of nice just to see my books are still out there and like new people are discovering them all the time. And then to be working on the next thing and being able to, so I'm getting ready to, I mean, not yet, but like a year from now when I'm like thinking about promoting that, like just something that's going to be fun for readers. I also love a panel I will get on Zoom at any point and chat about writing. That's so fun. But yeah, I mean, I've just seen so many people spend so much time and energy on like building their Twitter or building their TikTok. And then there are, for some folks, magic happens, but for most people, like I know somebody who has like ridiculous number of like Twitter followers and had like almost none of them bought their book. So it's like it doesn't actually correlate. And so I don't think people need to stress as much as they do about it.
Yeah, that's true. It's like one of those things, I think it's like you're so stressed in general that like you try and focus on things like that you feel like you have control, even though it's not actual control. Like, oh, I can build Twitter followers. Well, it's not going to make a difference in sales, but if it makes you feel better, then and, it's not, it's, I don't know. It makes me, I just sigh. But anyway. So Isabel,
I feel like it might make you feel better in the short term,
right,
it's that dopamine hit, but then it's disappointing, in the long term when you realize that it didn't translate into anything.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah. So Isabel, you talked about you have something upcoming. Is there anything you can or want to share? I know sometimes it's secret, so I don't know.
I can't say a whole bunch, but I will say that it is about, so my first books were about witches, and then I did vampires, and now I'm tackling ghosts. So I'm excited.
All right. And so I'll piggyback on that to say that as part of the big celebration for launching the Transmedia Mutts blog, we are giving away a copy of Isabel's the vampire one, The Coldest Touch. Yes. So go to transmediamutts.com. There will be a place you can enter for that. And then look out for her new one coming soon. And then Joy, yours is coming very soon. That's what we're going to. Yeah.
March 14th.
Yeah.
I'm super excited. It's obviously Shakespeare related. It's sort of a retelling of three of the tragic heroines' tales melded together, and it was an absolute delight to write. And so I'm really excited for it to be out in the world.
Yeah, and so that's what we're giving away. So if you win that one, you'll have to wait just a little bit longer till it actually is released, but it's not that far away. So
no, it's not.
Yeah. So all right, now my Zoom is going crazy. Hold on, sorry, y'all. Okay. So we're giving away a copy of Enter the Body. And so again, transmediamutts.com, go enter. And so that's very exciting. We're wrapping up. I want to be very conscious of y'all's time. So is there any last piece of advice you want to share with folks? I'll let you laugh.
Well, one of the things I always encourage is to find your community if you haven't yet, because the writing community is really wonderful. And the world is so much more connected now, and the pandemic was really hard, but in some ways it made things more interconnected as we sort of figured out how to do things like this. And how, my picture book critique group, several of them I've never met in person. It's all Zoom. So it can be a little tricky to find your people, but once you find them, it's such an important support, and it's nice to find people who are at the same stage as you are. But then people move at different paces. I was the last person in my group of friends to get a book deal, but then that was cool too, because they all had experience and they were able to tell me things and help me think through, so finding community is one of the big ones.
And then I think for me, so my big push, so I really focus on author burnout. That's sort of like the thing I do with my life coach hat. And so for me, the biggest thing is being able to celebrate where you are right now. So celebrating, hey, I wrote a really good bit of dialogue today, or I met my goal, or I noticed that I needed a nap and I actually took one, so like finding something to celebrate. And really, it's so I see, especially with like debuts, like they expect, and I did too, which is how I like know this is a thing. Like they expect that like everything's going to change, but then your book comes out and you're still you, and your family is still your family, and everything in so many ways is the same. So you have to learn to celebrate what you've got going on now, because that's really all you have, and then just keep building on those celebrations. Nothing is too small to celebrate.
That's very true. That is a great note to end it on. So I am going to end it there. Thank you, y'all. I can't tell you how appreciative I am that you were willing to stop by with my little experiment here. And it was so great talking to you. So thank you all very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for having us.